Hey guys, Keith Keller, Melbourne, Australia, and we got another really great episode of Wisdom Wednesday today. We just went to daylight savings, so it's actually Thursday at 10 a.m. We're almost a whole day ahead. And again, daylight saving always spins me out, but it's always going to be 7 p.m. Eastern forever. And so today we've got a whole show dedicated to podcasting. We've got guests coming and going throughout the day, which is just really a good excuse to say that they're late, but we're going anyway. So we've got other people coming in later. They're having some techo challenges and we're going to get them in later. But we've got my friend Elaine Lindsay calling in from Ottawa.
Yes.
So Ottawa, Canada. And we've got a really cool person, Kerry Gargone, calling in from Nashville.
I think Elaine's pretty cool.
I was just going to say, hang on a minute. What the hell? I'm not cool?
Did I say
I'm old?
Did
No,
I say,
it's like more an implication.
Wow, okay, so a good friend's not cool and a new person is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, now look at
Familiar
this.
with contempt, Keith.
Now we've changed the dynamic. Annemarie
is Annmarie cool or?
Annemarie is a very good friend and very cool. So how about that?
Well, okay.
And so here we go.
Gutted. I am gutted.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. A good friend can't, just by definition, it can't be very cool. I don't know how I'm riffing now. So Annemarie is calling in from Melbourne. We're both having extraordinary problems with the lockdown, and we're making a lot of fun out of this live streaming thing. Kerry's calling in from Nashville. Elaine is calling in from Ottawa, and I've got Joyce on the phone and on the call here from. I'm riffing now because I sort of got a bit distracted by
because he said Elaine wasn't cool, and we were like,
whoa, very special friend, very special friend.
Just a friend.
So what we're doing here is we're doing live streaming into a Facebook group and a Facebook page and Periscope. Now I know a lot of my friends are saying that live streaming is scary, and it is, because someone can throw this random question at you and then you've got to riff and make it up. But the power of live streaming right now is that this is the new paradigm. You know, I've been saying for a very long time that YouTube is getting harder and harder to crack. And this live streaming thing we're doing every week is a chance to play that game. But today we're talking about live streaming in the context of podcasting. And I know that Annemarie has a really cool system for that. She uses StreamYard and then rips the audio. I know Kerry's got a couple of podcasts as well. Joyce and I have a really cool membership.
Wait, you do stuff with her and you still think her name is Grace?
We wait to see how much trouble I get in when I call my wife the wrong name.
You know, Joyce, I thought he made you up because your last name is Glass, and I was like, that sounds fake, like Brady Bunch when she dated a guy named George Glass. I was like, that's not real. But you're here. So now I have to admit that you're real.
And I'm real. I'm really here.
Yeah.
So, and not Grace.
My maiden name's Brenneman, so I happily took the name Glass. But some people can screw it up, that gloss, gross, and grass. I'm like, where did you get gloss or gross out of grass, out of glass? And some people go, well, can you spell that for me? I'm like a drinking glass? And they're like, oh, okay.
Well, sorry, we're off the rails, Keith.
No, my fault. But really, in a way, this is exactly what we're talking about here. Live streaming can be a bit off the cuff. And I've been chatting to a lot of friends lately about this idea of live streaming versus pre-recording. And not everyone's up for it. But I'm really embracing it, especially during lockdown. We've got severe restrictions here, so I'm really going to embrace it. But today is all about podcasting. And let me just reiterate, we're sending this file to a Facebook group, a Facebook page, and a Periscope feed via Twitter, all with a lovely site called StreamYard. And I want to move into the first question. And the first question is, what is your process, and how long have you been podcasting for, and what is your process? So Annemarie, can you start? Because I really want to pick up on the idea that StreamYard is a great way to get the audio and the video, and you're doing both And this could be a really good way to sort of begin the conversation of why podcasting and live streaming sort of work in tandem, yeah?
Yeah. And what my process is now was certainly not my process when we first started. And as you might have already alluded to, Keith, I started podcasting in 2008, and that was with Keith when the global financial crisis hit. Yeah. We were both in the career industry, and we were just tired of the doom and gloom that mainstream media, and they haven't changed much, were portraying. And we knew that it was impacting the psyche of our ideal clients, who were job seekers, who were executives, who were professionals. Yeah. So we started Career Success Radio. We had no idea what we were doing, but we knew that we needed to share that message of hope and inspiration. So we did that for 2 years. I think one of the reasons, Keith, why we stopped our podcast was we tried very hard on identifying how do we monetize our podcast, because it's a great way to build our brand. We built incredible influence. We had a lot of impact with people from around the world, but we struggled to generate income for our business.
Yeah.
If you don't have ROI, then it's very difficult to continue. And so sort of fast forward, many, many years later, I had a number of different podcasts and still do. It was Women in Leadership podcast, which actually changed my entire journey. And it was after my worst business failure ever. And I thought, I can't write, can't content create, but I can ask good questions. I thought, I'm going to invite other women in business and women in leadership and get their stories. But what happened was 3 episodes in, I accidentally generated 2 4-figure clients. And I went years later, if I can do that by accident, what would happen if I was able to document those steps and intentionally repeat those? And so a book later, program later, that's exactly what I do. So there's a different process in the foundations and how I'm leveraging the podcast to build reputation as a trusted authority, build your reach with your ideal clients, and then ultimately your revenue. But that's
let me pick up on what you've just said there. You've said that podcasting can be a tremendous way to, and this is what today's show is about, it can be a tremendous way to build your brand, to build authority and be the trusted voice in your industry. And the reason why this show, Wisdom Wednesdays, exists is because we have a really engaged Facebook group for writers. And one of the problems that I know writers have is that when they finally get around to getting the book in the box, they forget that they should have really been marketing ahead of time. So this show is all about different ways to market. And you've had tremendous success with podcasting, haven't you?
Yeah. And, I've tried every single marketing, strategy and tactic and all sorts of different things. And I have found that what really has built engagement, and I've never been able to achieve the level of engagement and trust that I have from the podcast. I think there's something really unique about the community and the engagement when you get the content right. And a story that I often share with people, I've made all of the mistakes and then some, which is what I teach. My clients, don't do this, but do this. And so, if I think about message, because podcasting is a way that we share our message. I closed down my award-winning top-rated podcast a couple of years ago, and that was because my own message got lost in the noise of my own podcast. When you talk about your ideal customers, this is why it's so important to be really clear. And many businesses, we often think, hey, let's start a podcast because I'm struggling to get the message out. But what they don't realize is that if your message isn't working already, your podcast is only going to amplify the message that you're currently sharing. So number one, be mindful of what is that message? Am I clear about that? And the guests that I have on my podcast and the way that I share that, is that on brand? Is it continuing to position me as that authority? And are all of the things that I'm doing, such as live streaming, such as social media, everything, is that consistent in that message that I'm sharing? And does it continue to nurture my ideal client through the customer journey of what we know, build awareness?
That is absolutely brilliant, because I know for sure, and we've worked together since 2008, most people come to you and say, look, what mic do I need? Do I need to get a background? Do I need a Zoom background? And even there's some questions in the call here. Can I use Zoom to make a podcast? But what you're saying, let's take a step back. What are you talking about? Who's your ideal client? Who are you talking to? What do they want to hear? Forget the mic. Forget the background. Forget if you've done your hair. What are you saying?
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about that, don't you?
It's even more important now, Keith, and I'm sure the other guests would agree, because so many more businesses are now online. There is a lot more noise and a lot more clutter and content, which is a good thing, but it's not a good thing if we haven't really honed our message. And an example that I shared and my background is in personal branding. That's what you and I would talk about often, interview coaching, resume development, personal branding. And an example that I use with people is if the way in which you're sharing your message, someone could come, remove your name, add their name to that message and continue to share that, because it kind of shares a little bit about what they do and the expertise they're sharing. You're not distinguishable and you're not uncopyable. And so take a bit of time. What is your story and your journey that you have gone through that adds value to the content that you're sharing, that no one else can copy you because you are uncopyable. And when you put that together in a really, irresistible message, that is when you really stand out, as well as being consistent in the content that you share.
That's brilliant. Now let me move around the room. The original question is, what is your process and how long have you been podcasting? We've already morphed into the idea of branding and about the idea of a story. Kerry, can you tell me a little bit about your podcasting journey and then map it over what we've talked about, the idea of being authentic, about being unique? And you've got a couple of really cool podcasts that you share with your tribe, don't you?
Thank you. Well, I've been podcasting since 2005 when it was much more difficult to do. I started a podcast called Baby Time, and it was about pregnancy and family and stuff, because I was thinking, well, if I hate it, I can stop because I'll have the baby and be like, oh, podcast's over. I ended up
okay. You had an exit statement from day one.
Oh, it was really hard to do then. I had to have like an XLR microphone with connections to get all the audio in. And it was a process. And so it's actually gotten so much easier now. I started doing the Marketing Profs podcast in 2013. And I've been doing it since then. My process for that was very different. The apps have changed over the years. I've tried about everything just to try to get the best audio quality. I'm a real stickler for that. I like single track and everything. So I would book guests for that and then try really hard to kind of troubleshoot the audio and then painstakingly edit so that they sounded their best when it was all over. So it was very involved for audio only. Ironically, since now I do the Backpack Show with Chris Brogan, which is live video.
And he's just said hello, Kerry. He's just said hello.
Hello. We don't release it as audio. So now it's like, well, it's live. And when it's over, it's over. And there's no editing at all. So it's a completely different process and we use StreamYard as well. So, which I love. It's so easy. So the process it's very different depending which show I'm doing. Punch Out with Katie and Kerry, I do quarterly. It focuses on people's hobbies and stuff like that. And we kind of bunch it because neither of us, my co-host nor I, had time to do like another weekly show. Katie Robert is the CEO of Trust Insights. And she's like, she has no time, basically. If we wanted to do a show every week, I think we'd burn out. So we book a few days every quarter and we record all the season's episodes and we release them all at once when they're finished. So it's like about once a quarter, we release a whole season at once. So my process is different for everything. I don't know.
Okay. Well, let me just pick up on what we're doing here. We're using StreamYard, and we've got a couple of questions in the room about how does StreamYard differ to Zoom. We're going to get to those questions specifically, but I want to say a big hello to Chris, who's a big. We're all very big fans of Chris, and he's calling in from Periscope. You can see there the Periscope sign. So what StreamYard does, by comparison to what we'll talk about with Zoom, is you can actually add comments from the various streams. So we're sending this file to Facebook in a group and a profile or a page, and we're also using Periscope. So
other services do that, but this is so easy, Keith, because I know I tried them all.
And we've been doing this such a long time that when we used Blog Talk Radio, we used to have to go to the milk bar and get a $5 phone card, call in from Australia, and you'd sound like you were in the outback.
Like someone's yelling at you.
Shocking quality, but in 2008, that's all there was, right? This is so easy, and I'm playing around with the concepts as we go, and I'm sorry to shuffle around, but I want to show you what StreamYard is capable of. So what Annemarie does is she uses a StreamYard file, and then she splits it into an MP3, sends it to audio, an MP4, which you can then edit and create videos. Kerry has a series of podcasts as well, and she has a lot of different variations there, and she's been doing it a long time and has all the gear. But Elaine, how does this fit in with your model of the podcasting and video making world?
Well, I started with video, a long time ago for video at least, in 2011, and started with Google Hangouts and started a show in 2012 that's still going. Last year, we decided that it would really make sense to make the show into a podcast because I had some amazing guests. There's 3 of them sitting here. Chris Brogan's another one, Ted Rubin, all kinds of amazing people that really love to offer value to everybody. So for me, turning that into a podcast made a great deal of sense. Like Kerry, I do have another podcast, but it is at the moment once a month for the very same reason. There's only so many hours in the day.
Okay, well, let me pick up on what you've just all said there and flip it over to Zoom, because StreamYard is a relatively new concept. How do you guys think Zoom compares to this arrangement? I found it a bit clunky. I know Anne-Marie's had a bit of trouble. Can you briefly talk about why you would use Zoom instead of StreamYard in this context and the pros and cons?
I used Zoom, I think it was back in 2018, when I realized you could stream live. But then as soon as I heard of Restream, and then when StreamYard was still in beta and I could see where they were going, I mean, I knew that was the platform. And what other platform, why wouldn't you, if you can stream live across different, kind of platforms? And it's so simple. And I don't think I've ever had any issue with StreamYard, whereas sometimes with Zoom, it would just not connect. Like today, I had a coaching session with some clients, could not stream it live to our group. So I found Zoom to be a lot clunkier. That's my...
Yeah, look, let me pick up on that exact point, just to answer Joey's question. Zoom has 2 major flaws in its streaming model. One is it only streams to Facebook and or YouTube, and it often doesn't work. So both of those things are a severe limitation. StreamYard is almost bulletproof, and you can stream to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and up to 8 places at once for about the same cost. I don't work for StreamYard, but maybe I should. I love them.
No, I've been using StreamYard since March, and now they sponsor the Backpack Show, but we used it first. We used it, loved it, and talked about how much we loved it, and now they sponsor us, and so now we have a link where people get an extra discount and all of that stuff. cbrogan.me/StreamYard. But we used it first and loved it because it was so easy.
Put that link in by all means. We'll try. So Dar is one of the really lovely people in our Facebook group, and she's asked the question, well, what's a really good way to get started on the podcasting idea? How do you get started? What do you start with? Do you want to start, Annemarie?
I want to jump in here and say something. I think it's really important. If you aren't starting yet and you want to start, hire Annemarie. And that's not a plug. She didn't pay me yet or anything like that. Annemarie will give you the basics that you need to really make a go of it. Because you don't want to be sort of stuck giving it a try and kind of petering out very quickly because you have no idea what you should be talking about, etc., etc. It's all kind of it's like anything. If you want to do it well, then you need to go to somebody who does it well.
Well, let me pick up on that very clearly. Anne-Marie's been doing it since 2008. We've been podcasting since September.
I'm just saying.
Well, okay, you win.
No, it's cool. I'll be here like when y'all get back around to me.
So, geez, I can just imagine what podcasting was like in 2005. Geez.
It actually was awful.
I didn't think Australia had the internet in 2005.
What was those teleseminar live where you'd ring in? And that was horrendous. go too.
Instant teleseminar. Instant teleseminar.
And they weren't called podcasts back then, but and thank you, Elaine, for that. But this is, if you're a service-based business and you want to leverage your podcast to build that reputation, your reach, and ultimately your revenue, where you start, and this is what I mentioned earlier, you really have to know, what is your end in mind? What are you going to monetize? What are your services? And so many clients potential clients come to me and say, what microphones should I use? Now, audio quality is important, but you need to, and I've said this so many times, you need to really be clear that you're in focus on your message rather than the make and model of the microphone, because you cannot edit and mix compelling content that converts from banter and fluff. And what I often find too is, and I've done this myself, if you start talking about specific topics and all of a sudden you shift, or you're talking about so many different topics, you don't position yourself as a trusted authority. So you really need to get clear on that. And secondly, the mistake that the accidental 2-4-figure clients led me to come up with a system. And I know that, Elaine, you've heard me talk about this, is that when you start your podcast and you're doing it specifically because you want to seed and lead your ideal clients through the customer journey, build know, like, and trust, and those people who are ready to make a decision, have them go, yes, I'm ready to take that next step. Make sure that episode 0 and 1, 2, and 3 are on your thought leadership. And then that becomes your opt-in, and that becomes the call to action at the end of every podcast episode. And so that's what I would focus on first. What is your kind of the brand, your personal brand, your message? What are you really positioning yourself as that trusted authority in, and ensure that your podcast content, the collaboration, the community, your charisma, all of that is really defined. And then you're ready to launch.
Let me pick up on that, and then I'll throw to the group. One of the things that defines Annemarie's process is that you have a series approach rather than an ongoing podcast approach. This is a very different strategy.
Both.
So you do both, but you're very famous, and you did one for me, a 10-part series. So you have this, what you call episode 0, this idea of a podcast series, which is an opt-in, and that's a very good strategy. And also many people have an ongoing podcast series. Can I throw to you, Kerry, to see how you go with the idea of podcasting? What would you recommend people do to start?
Well, I think that Annemarie's exactly right. You need to know why you're doing it, and you need to know what you're going to talk about, and you have to have some idea how that's going to further your business. Now, it can't be like about your business, because no one is interested in that. But, if you've got some kind of crossover between what you want to talk about, what you do, and then, what people are interested in. This is why Red Bull sponsors extreme athletes. It's like there's crossover there. So find that, and then make sure that it's something you feel like talking about over and over and over and over again, different aspects of it for a long time, because it is work and it can feel like a grind. But the Backpack Show is daily, 2 guests a day. And it doesn't feel like a grind. I love it because they're interesting people that I choose. And I'm super interested in talking to them about success and finding insights about success from unusual sources. And so for that reason, it furthers my own creative interests. So I think you have to, that's what you have to do. You have to start from a place of, what am I going to talk about? How does it help the community I serve? And can I enjoy talking about this for ever, potentially?
Yeah, look, I really think that's important. You've got to start with the idea that, first of all, you're into the message, and you can commit to doing it over time. You've committed to a daily show, which is, I take my hats off to you for that. That's a really massive commitment, but you're loving it and you're learning so much, yeah?
Yeah, completely. I've talked to, we had a professional dominatrix on, we had a nun on, we've had just a breathtaking array of people, and they all had something: comedians, Broadway actresses, some Mexican actors that do horror comedy shows. They do Diablero on Netflix, but they've all got insights that carry over into business and life. So I learn something new every day from people that I would never have probably come across in our ordinary circles. So I love it. And I think you need to really love it, is what I'm saying. You need to really love it.
Well, you need to be able to put up with the bullshit you get right at the start of the show, and people call you out for calling people different names. So you're right.
Don't then maybe get it right, Keith. I mean, it's one thing for me if you mess it up because you don't know me, but you work with Joyce. So that I was like, the what?
I still can't get over sometimes I call my wife the wrong name. That's the real clincher.
That's
But
not
classy about it, though.
Elaine, tell me about what you think could be a good starting point for people if they want to start a podcast or a video show or both. Have you got some tips to get us started?
Well, the tips to get started are really just repeating what they said. You have to know what you want to talk about. You have to stay within that niche. And as Annemarie said, like, you can't be all over the map. I can't tell you how many podcasts we've tuned into, and then it's like, oh, what the hell is that? Like, it's, it's way off in left field somewhere. Your daily, Kerry, I know you have all kinds of different people, but it's all kind of the same concepts. It's like what we do on the show. It's all different kinds of people, all walks of life, just like Kerry is, but it's all about their digital journey. That's what we talk about, because that's what people are interested in. People want to know, well, how can I do that? And in terms of podcasting, same kind of thing. I think it's critical, like everything else. You have to be consistent.
Yeah.
You have to be congruent, and you have to feel within yourself that you want to be seen. Because not to get too esoteric here, but I'm forever telling clients that you have to understand that visibility comes with what you do online. It is absolutely critical that you understand where you're at before you start, because it can just be an absolute fiasco.
I didn't want to do video, Elaine. I was doing audio and I was very happy with it. And then Chris Brogan pulled me out front to co-host the backpack with him. I mean, literally one day it was like, oh, button in StreamYard. And I was out front and I was like, okay, I guess this is the thing now. But I don't think about it as me being visible. I think about it as elevating voices that we want to help get more representation.
I think that is something that we all have in common. Like, we all have shows where there's a guest, and we all really honor the guest. And I tell you for sure, this is my advice for podcasters. If you have a show that honors guests, you are serving the world. And that in itself is worth doing. It's worth doing, because there's 3 people on this call that are coming in from all over the world, and they're on my show. And I'm sharing that with my tribe. And that is a reason for being. And that probably answers Joyce's question of how do you do it over and over and over again? What do you want to talk about? Because once you get a system and you love it, it becomes like your daily dose of coffee in the morning. You can't do without it. Can you?
No, and I love talking to people. So we have in common is we're looking for insights about success and what you need in your metaphorical backpack to succeed in business and in life. But yesterday, I just saw Dar's comment about supporting first responders. I think it was yesterday or the day before. We had a firefighter on who deadlifted 585 pounds in his full gear, and the weights were on fire. So I was like, how do you not want to talk to someone like that? But I think the thing is, you've got that through line, like Elaine was saying, and it serves your community, the community that you serve, and it's beneficial and interesting to you as well. I think that's where kind of the sweet spot happens. Yeah. So we can talk about success with anybody, really.
Yeah. And Annemarie, you say this a lot. This is like your reading you've once said to me. You love having guests on the show because you learn stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. There's so many different things that you can learn. Although what I have done, I remember years ago on, it was the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, I asked a colleague in the US, I said to her, I'm thinking of doing a show on my own. What do you think? And she said, I think it's fantastic. In fact, I just listened to one of my mentors. This is her telling me, one of my mentors, and it was just her on her own. So I tried an experiment, and that podcast episode that I did on my own got triple or quadruple the amount of downloads in a short amount of time. And so remember, my ideal clients are service-based businesses. They're thought leaders in their field. And so you want to make sure that, and you can do solo shows too. So you can do a mixture and it depends, because we use our podcast as very much part of our marketing funnel too. So if you've got a launch coming up, you want to make sure that the guests that you have or your own shows kind of leading up to that starts talking about some of the challenges and so forth, so that leading up to that launch, you're bringing your podcast listeners, through and maybe to a challenge. So it depends on what kind of process that you're using, but you can use your podcast in that way too. But I'm always learning. I love it.
And I've got a big hello to Doug, who's in our several of our groups, and he asked the question, how much time do you spend per week on your podcasting? Can you just explain the process of getting guests and the editing and how much time people could reasonably expect to spend?
I know when we started, Keith, it would take you, about 8 hours, if not a little bit more, to organise for guests from Woe to go. And I remember when I went on my own, I thought there's no way I can spend that much time. So I've kind of got a process now. I batch all of my interviews, and I also produce for a number of alliance partners. So at the end of a month, of the third week and the fourth week, I'll batch. And so I could, when I was doing my daily show, I could have up to 24 episodes in that week. And so that means then that all of the raw content is there. And then I have an editing team. I've got a VA that does different things. And so it really depends on, what you're doing, how you're using your content.
But you do have to be quite timely though, don't you?
Do, but I think if you have a system, create a system, and then if that's repeatable and understandable, you can then outsource that to team to support you, so that you can focus on creating the content, having the conversations, and you've got a team working behind you that is distributing that and getting that up across the different platforms.
And what about you, Kerry? How much time would you spend on the various shows you're now doing?
So baby time took forever because it was so early, and everything was so difficult. Every step in the process was so difficult. You were almost like hard coding things. It's gotten so much easier. When I started the Marketing Profs podcast, which was audio only, I was learning to edit things myself. I was learning to do those things, post-production things myself. So then it was probably the equivalent of about 8 hours a week. It was pretty sizable. As I got faster, it got to be less. And Marketing Profs, I don't have a problem getting guests. Like, people pitch us all the time. And I know a lot of people through Marketing Profs. So that's not super extensive amount of time. So it was really just getting a handle on the post-production stuff and the logistics and things like that. For the backpack show, I spend probably like a half a day every weekend pitching and booking and setting up live streams. In StreamYard, you set up the feed, and then I do calendar invites with all the links and that sort of thing. We still do all that. Like, it's all systematized. We could outsource it, but we don't right now, because this is something that we're starting and we want to be personally involved in every part of it. So from beginning to end, like, I select any gifts for the guests and send them myself. And it's all right now it's very hands-on. So it's different. Punch Out, it's about 2 solid weeks of work, I would say. So it's like taking a vacation to get your podcast together. Yeah. So that's
what about you? What about you, Elaine? The idea of the structure of the how much time would it take, and Kerry's alluded to sort of forward planning. Do you do a bit of this too?
Well, yeah, you have to. The show BBP TV is, because the initial show is video as well. We do it every 2 weeks, and there's probably, I have a VA who does a lot of the background work, the research and what have you. But I probably put in 5 to 6 hours every couple of weeks, and then at the end of the month, they get batched and turned into the audios that we use for the podcasts.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit here about the time that it takes. Now, several people in the chat room have asked, once you've got the show going and you're thumping the system, how do you promote it? And I think Dar has asked that question, but several other people are interested in this particular idea. How do you market the show? How do you promote it?
It needs a place to live. You need to have an audience. So if you've already been, working on your community, your network, stuff like that, without the hope of getting them to give you anything or buy anything from you, I mean, you're just creating content. I think it's very easy to put it out there and on your social networks, for one thing, and say, hey, this is super interesting. Come and talk to this author. Come and talk to this mother-daughter pair of authors. It's like interesting, free stuff. and I don't have any problem promoting on my social feeds, that type of content. But I really think you need to have an email newsletter. If you don't have an email newsletter, you're falling down for sure, because that's the only way you can reliably talk to people who want to hear from you. But, you know, Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn may or may not ever show your great content to them. So I would start with an email list. So
building your email. I know Annemarie's big on this too, and it looks like we've lost Elaine. I'm gonna hope that she comes back. So I'm pardon the moving around. I'm trying a lot of different visual talk because I want to show the group what's possible. Mm-hmm. So StreamYard is this very robust system that's very easy to use and very cost effective, and many people in the group have never used StreamYard.
Seriously, it's so easy.
And it's so very easy. And I'm going to go back to your wonderful affiliate link. And so when Elaine goes, that's right.
StreamYard.
That's right. I'll look for that. And so Annemarie, do you propose the email marketing piece as a way of promoting your podcast? How do you do it?
Yeah, definitely. And so all of the socials, you know, I love the IGTV. So we'll include the full video on IGTV, which works really well. There might be snippets that we cut from, you know, various episodes that really have got a great message, and then we share that across socials. But the lives work really well too. I find that there's a completely different audience than the audio audience, and I'm always trying different things where, you know, when we are live, because I know that I'm going to be using that recording, I have to obviously pre-frame and let people know why I'm talking to this random person. And I might say something like, by the way, you know, we are streaming these lives at the time, so you can ask the question of the guests too. So what I'm trying to do is integrate the audience and bring them across to, say, LinkedIn also, so that they can participate, you know, within that. So yeah, but across all platforms. And use it weekly.
The email newsletter, Substack is super easy. We just started using Substack. It gives you all the juicy analytics, and it's very easy to use.
All right, I'm gonna bring Joyce in on this exact story because she has a really robust email strategy, and she uses a site called Kartra.
Joyce Glass.
Yes, right. Not Grace, not Glass. It's Joyce. Just get the name right, Keith. So, Elaine, before I bring in Joyce Glass, can I talk to you about email newsletters and how you promote the show? Elaine.
I have to admit, we're really crappy about email newsletters, and I should be slapped, but I really believe in being honest. We promote it. What's that?
Substack. Try Substack.
I was just writing it down. Thank you. It just, with everything else that seems to be going on here lately, COVID's been a very interesting time, let's say. Just kind of let that get lost in the translation. So my bad, and have to fix that. But we do promote on all the social channels, and our guests promote, our tribe promotes, which really helps. And we have a lot of groups on both LinkedIn and Facebook that also promote the show.
Well, brilliant. Now I'm going to bring Joyce in because I know she loves email marketing, and we want to talk about our system. And I want to say hello to Lydia, who's in Germany. Now, really, we are going global.
Keith, did you know you can drag us around? If the windows in StreamYard, you could like move us in whatever order you want.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Just drag and drop. Chris likes to be on his side of the bed, so.
Look at that. I didn't know that.
Yep.
You should come on our show every week. I learn something every day. So Lydia has asked the question, how do you sequence your funnel? I want to just bring Joyce into the call because Joyce has a really lovely community. She's built the community, and it's called TheWriteCoach.biz. We have a really lovely system where we help writers with writing the book, publishing the book, and now I'm involved in helping them promote the book. And email is a very strong part of your system, isn't it, Joyce?
You might be muted, Joyce.
I think you might have muted yourself.
I did, so you wouldn't hear all my pecking around. You should see, I've got all screens going. I've got my iPad has the group live, my phone has the page live. I'm doing questions everywhere, and then somebody sent me a Facebook message And he was asking about, is this about live streaming a podcast? I said, it's about live streaming your podcast. So, and he was like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
right. Very meta, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and I love what Annmarie does. I just don't know that I'm brave enough to do it yet, because I just hadn't gotten there. I mean, part of it's like, you know, sometimes I want to chit chat before and after, and we take a while, and, you know, then I gotta make sure I get this live stream done. And so haven't quite mentally got there yet, Annmarie.
You haven't sequenced your funnel for list building?
Yeah. Well, let's play that. Let's play on this. Let's play on this idea. I want to pick up on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot going on.
Joyce just got here.
I know.
I hear from Joyce.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the sequencing of the funnel, Joyce, and let people know how we do it and how you specifically do it. Before we met, you were using a really great site called Kartra, which I love that you're using it. Tell me about that. But tell me about the sequencing of the funnel, and even talk about what a funnel is for people that haven't heard that phrase.
Okay, for those who don't know what a funnel is, it's essentially what, I forgot who was talking about, the journey that you take your customer on. And it's essentially, that's what it is, the journey you take your customer on. And depending upon where my customer finds me, if they come into the group first here in the Write My Book on Facebook, I ask the question, or I tell them, hey, if you want, you can download learn the 4 steps to the Write Book by going to my website and signing up for it. The other thing is, on my podcast, I always have a way for them to sign up there. I say it in the outro. I have, and in here, you know, in the group, we share things, and all of my podcasts are shared in here, the links to my podcast. So it's kind of like a mix, but you want the email is a place to get them to know you better. And so then those that are on my email list learn about, get the podcast every week, and I have a little special blurb just for them that I don't put out on the website. And so that makes, you know, that a little more interesting for them, and it's not just, hey, here's my podcast. You know? It's a
bit more personal, isn't it?
Right. And if you're doing any kind of email now, and I'm sure all the ladies here that have done email will tell you the same thing, it needs to have more of a personal touch and storytelling. Would you ladies not agree?
Definitely.
Yeah. You can't just go, hey, here's my podcast, and run off and leave, because they're going to go, great, delete. But if you make it interesting and you share a little bit about your life, or I like to ask questions. I'm always a why person, or, you know, how are you doing? And so I always ask a question that's related to the podcast. Have you ever struggled with blah, 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 whatever it is that the podcast is about? And that leads them into, well, if they have struggled, well, yeah, I have. And so you're starting a conversation with them. And that's what you've got to consider these emails. Because I love how somebody put it one time, and I can't remember who I was talking to. But they said, would you go up to somebody's front door, open it, and go, here's my podcast, and here's this, and here's that? No, you'd say, hey, how you doing? You'd warm the conversation up. You just wouldn't shove it in their face.
This is even worse. It's like they invite you into their home, and you're like, here's my podcast.
Yeah. And you just don't want to do that. That's just rude. As Michelle used to say on Full House, how rude. Or Stephanie was actually who said that, wasn't it? Stephanie said rude. So that, you know, definitely email list. And I have to say, email list is one of the hardest things for me to get the growth that I want. It is not growing as fast. I've had more traction and interaction in the Facebook group than I do with my email list, but my email list is growing as the Facebook group has grown.
Yeah.
So it's connection.
I think the idea of email is, again, the idea of time, and I feel Elaine's pain, because I've never had an email newsletter because I hate writing. But, we've got so many choices available to us. And I think I've often said the best type of marketing is the marketing you will do. Even if email was provable as a thing to do, I will not do it because I just don't like reading newsletters, and I certainly don't want to create one. But Kerry has got this really lovely site, and what's it called again, this site that you're using?
Substack. And they're not sponsoring us or anything.
No,
I just use them. It's easy to use. Does that sound like... I'll tell you why I care about it. So email marketing, and Chris would tell you the same thing, Chris Brogan, but email is like the bread and butter of his business because it is the only guaranteed connection you have with the community you serve. So every other place, one algorithm change and they don't see you anymore, even if they liked your page, even if they followed you on Twitter. We get easily the most response from people who've given us the invite to come into their inbox. So we respect that invitation, like you were saying, Joyce, and provide them, a look at who we are. And we make it a real personal connection the way you would if somebody invited you to their home, just like you were saying. Mm-hmm. But Substack makes it really, really easy. We can collaborate, share drafts, things like that. And it's just really easy to use. So if you want like a low barrier to entry and you want to experiment, and you can build your list everywhere. You can build it on social. You can mention it on your podcast. I mean, there's a million ways to build your list, right? It's pretty easy. The stakes are so low. Like it doesn't cost a lot of money to use Substack. I think there's even a free plan. So just give it a try and see what you can do with it. The guarantee is that you're going to reach people more often with more reliability than you will on social. Is the thing. Can't speak for a podcaster. Have a speech impediment.
Does that help, Elaine? Does that get your email newsletter mojo going, or are you with me? Or you just don't have time?
Well, yeah, it looks like it will be very useful, and it seems I already have an account there, so it would make sense if I perhaps used it. Yeah, one of those things, early adopters. I'm always trying everything. One thing I will say, Keith, because as much as you don't like Zoom, I was a beta tester with Zoom and have been using it forever. And I have to say, this year, I'm really not happy with Eric and where he's taken it. Because it is now, it's all about enterprise. And the initial concept has kind of gone by the wayside, which I think is unfortunate.
Okay. He sort of corporatized it.
Yeah.
The only upside I ever saw to Zoom for recording audio podcasts is you can have 3 separate tracks. There's other services. Yeah. There's other services where you can get that, like Zencaster and stuff like that. But 3 separate tracks, if you're really fussy about audio, it's invaluable. Like streaming live, I love it because it minimizes post-production. It's like, it is what it is. We've got just the one track. There's not much I can do. So it's almost good for a perfectionist like me. But if you really do want to get in there and like rejigger things so that the levels are good.
When you can,
maybe doing that, mightn't they, Emily? There's been people that have asked for more than just one track. So they keep expanding their offerings, so they just keep amazing. I love StreamYard for sure.
Me too.
Oh, I'm a definite convert.
Yeah. Well, look, Dar's very active in the group, and she's asked if you can give a bit of a basic estimate as to what it might cost to set up a podcast and equipment. Once you've got your mojo, have you got an idea of what sort of basic equipment is required and what the basic setup costs might be? Do you want to start, Annemarie? Because you've got a lot of gear. And
yeah, is she in the US or Australia? Because when you look at Australia versus US. Australians get ripped off, but I mean, when I first started, I just had a Logitech headset. I mean, this is Rode, a Rode. I've had all sorts of different microphones, but you don't necessarily need it. Depends on what kind of budget. I think in the US you can get a really good sounding podcast microphone for a couple of $100, or you can go the real $600.
You could get one for $60 though, if you wanted like a good one, like decent one.
Yeah.
You could. This is a couple $100. It's a Rode. Those are really good.
Yeah, that Rode is nice.
You've got a Snowball, haven't you, Joyce? And that's what, $60, isn't it?
My little Snowball's been handy.
Yep. And it doesn't cost a lot. I use noise canceling headphones as well, which probably set me back, I don't know, like another 60. But it's because I'm an audiophile. I'm really fussy about it. But that's it. And I've used these for 7 years. I just replace the ear pads once in a while. So these are Sony Pro, but invest in a good set of headphones and a microphone. Okay. And that will take you so far. Even really good looking video is unwatchable if the audio is bad. So
why do you use the headphones, just out of curiosity?
Why do I use them? Because I can hear things that will bother people who are listening on headphones that like Chris won't hear because he's using earbuds or something. So for him, the look is more important. For me, I'm listening for the benefit of the people on the other side who maybe have their headphones on at work or something and are going to be really annoyed because there's like a hum or a piece of static or something. So I'm listening for things like that, or clicking or weird things that you wouldn't pick up on a less sensitive thing. And then hosting, I don't know.
Professional.
Podcast hosting is really inexpensive. I use Libsyn, which is like the granddaddy. So Liberated Syndication, Libsyn for short. And it's really inexpensive. I think I had 2 podcasts going there for like $30 a month or something.
Yeah.
So it's really,
might want to check out acast.com. They have amazing analytics. But the other thing that I love is it customizes a player to the colors of my website.
You can brand it up.
And then you can brand it up and you can share it from the player on the website. It does a lot, and it's not expensive either. I don't know how long they've been around, but they do an excellent job with.
You can brand Libsyn.
You can.
I've never seen it branded. That's why.
Because people are lazy, but you can't.
Yeah.
Either way, hosting is not expensive.
Most of the Libsyn ones I haven't seen haven't looked as pretty to me as mine does.
You like yours is why.
Yes, I do.
So the cost overall, like the setup cost, it depends on the equipment that you select and the software you use to edit. I use Camtasia, which is like $100 for if you have the version for Mac. It's more if you get, I think it's like a few $100s if you buy the studio version for Windows. It has like a bunch of juicy options. I didn't need them. There are plenty of free tools. There's plenty of free tools for editing, like Audacity. You could start with that.
And another one that I've wondered if anybody here has used either is Octbus.com. They are amazing for sound because all you have to do is you edit out all the the ums and the words, but you upload it to their system and it will adjust the sound. It's a professional way to adjust the sound, and I've been using that for over a year now, and I love it. It's much easier, especially for those that are not technical, that don't want to deal with Audacity, because Audacity drove me crazy. It was, so ticky, and I'm techie, and I hated it. But
I'm not that tech. I'm like semi-techie, and I found Camtasia worked for me. But just find like whatever works for you.
Right,
the other good thing about Camtasia is it's not just audio. I can actually take excerpts from the Backpack Show, and make clips and stuff like that. And it's very easy to use. So it's got this one feature, and then I'll shut up about Camtasia, but it's got this one feature where now you can actually like transcribe and then select the words that you want to edit out. Like if somebody said, "Oh, excuse me, my dog was barking," you could select the words in the transcript and kill it, and it will take the clip out of the audio.
I do that in Descript because not all my podcasts need edited like that. Because a lot of times it goes pretty smoothly, but if I had one where the dog interrupted me twice, and I forget something else happened. But like I was just using Descript right before we got on because I'm editing the podcast going out tomorrow, and she said a lot of and ums a lot, and so I'm going, and Descript highlights, and so all I have to do is look for the highlights, delete.
So good, right? So good.
Yeah, so
the cost isn't that extensive, is what I was trying to tell people. Like it really isn't. Startup cost is fairly minimal. Ongoing is not that expensive either.
Yeah, I would say $45-50 a month, depending upon what all you're using. Because that's including like if you use email, might be a little more. But your email service, your editing service, and your hosting service are the big things that you would need.
Brilliant. Now let's move on to another question that many of the groups, many of the people in the group have asked, and that is, if I'm not ready yet to be hosting a podcast and doing all the techie and things and just running it all, how do you get on other people's podcasts? We all run podcasts and we get thousands of requests all the time for this. So what can you do to stand out as a potential guest on someone else's podcast if you want to do that as a warm-up to having your own? Any ideas?
Be interesting. No, I'm only being a little bit funny. Somebody asked me, how do I get on the Backpack Show? I said, do something interesting and tell me about it. That's literally all you have to do.
Okay.
So
and
if you say, I want to come on and sell my stuff, that's never going to be interesting.
Yeah. No.
You know, so have listened to the show, know what it's about and what it's like.
Yeah.
And then explain like that you think you'd be a good fit for it and why. But I'm sorry, you were saying, Elaine.
And no, I was just going to add to what you said there and be succinct in how you explain it. Okay, because somebody that sends you a big rambling, please have me on your show, and it just goes on and on, highly unlikely that that's someone you're going to choose.
Yeah, well, I'm going to
gives you the meat.
I want to start with a story, and I want to throw to you on this exact story because Annemarie and I have this happen all the time. In 2015, I ran a podcast called the Global Spotlight Show, exactly like this, except it was a podcast. It ran for 6 months. I think we did 26 shows every week for 26 weeks in 2015 on iTunes. Annemarie set it up and we did that. And I'm still getting emails from that show in 2015. Hey, I've seen you've got a podcast. Can I come on? And I feel like saying,
no.
Have you seen it? Did you watch it? Did you listen to it? Do you know that it's not on
When's
anymore?
the last time we did a show?
Have you ever listened to it? So be prepared. You know, if you're gonna ask someone to go on their podcast, just don't do this standard cut and paste letter and send it out 100 times. Listen to the podcast and get a flavour for what it's about. Is it still going? What sort of guests do they have? How can you add value? And what's your pitch to them? For me, the pitch is, well, how are you going to promote it? I've got 100 people a week trying to come on my podcast, but what do they bring to the show? Sure, that the content is interesting, but are you going to promote it too? Have you got a bit of a tribe? And this is especially important for the writers in the group, because we know for sure if you go to a publisher, they're going to ask the question, okay, if I'm going to give you an advance and publish this book, can you help me sell 10,000 books? Have you got a system? And if you just say, well, no, that's your job.
No. So okay. I feel like, though, if you have any kind of platform, you have, at this point in time, at least, a responsibility to help elevate, like, BIPOC people, women, anybody who maybe has been underrepresented. I make an effort, we both do, Chris and I, to seek out those stories and bring people on the show. So it's not just like a blindingly white podcast, like another one. So So I'm not necessarily saying, well, you know, how are you going to promote it? What are you going to do for us? It's more like, here's a person doing amazing things that other people need to know about. I want them on.
Right.
I love the word responsibility there. I think you're right. We've gone to the trouble of setting up the tech. I've gone to the trouble of getting a mic and a webcam and this lovely software called StreamYard. And I, as you said, I've got a responsibility now to share the knowledge of the world. I think you're right. I think you shouldn't get too wrapped up in how are you going to promote it. But if I'm getting 100 emails now, if I'm getting 100 emails a week, and someone, for instance, one of my decoders is that if they're not on Twitter, well, you know, really, how can they help? Because this thing goes on Periscope, which goes on Twitter, and if they don't have a Twitter account, well, how can they push it out once it's gone out? I mean, they can't be involved in the post-production.
So we book two guests per show. And so we have gives you a little more wiggle room then.
Wiggle room.
So you've got one person doing important work that, you know, they don't have a big audience necessarily yet, or they don't have a big community yet. You can bring them on. Like we brought on Sir Mix-a-Lot, And that same day, I had another woman who she has a Black-owned business, and they're doing work in Boston to publicize events for the Black community there. And I was like, people need to know about that. So paired them together. So now she gets the benefit of the platform that Sir Mix-a-Lot has built. So you get a little wiggle room the more people you book, I guess. So nice job here.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Annemarie, or Joyce, or
I
Elaine?
will tell you, episode 502 on my Right Hour, for those that are want to check it out. It's Susan Neal. She sent me an email, and I put a screenshot of it in the show notes, because she did excellent. She did exactly what Kerry was saying. She had listened to my podcast. She had told me what she could offer for the podcast to help that was related to readers, to my listeners. She had written a book and had sold over, I think it was at that time, 8,000 copies in 14 months, which is really good on a self-published book.
Yeah.
And she then was gearing towards, when she was looking to go with me, she was looking to get on podcast. And so she would listen to them, and she would say, I really like this. I learned this from your podcast. This helped me, and I would love to be a guest. This is what I've done, and these are the topics I could cover to help your listeners. That's all people want. And like you said, whoever said succinct, I think it was you, Elaine, on it, that it's just, if you are succinct and you have something that you can offer their listeners, they're going to want it, most likely. Very rarely will they say no unless they have their own little, list going on, and they don't want outside people asking. Some podcasts I know are like that, some aren't. So you just got to see. And then back to the getting requests, I was helping an author find podcasts to be on. And one of my things was, I would go look, when was the last time there was a podcast released? And if it was like, a year ago, 3 years ago, I'm like, nope, don't listen to that one. So that's another thing. Look, because iTunes shows you, and most podcast apps will show you the release date. And if it was the last release date was, 6 months ago or a year ago, and they haven't posted anything else since then they're not doing it anymore. So don't waste your time sending your paste and copy email to them. So save yourself some trouble.
And spell their name right.
Yes. And don't call me Lindsay.
No.
Oh, Grace.
You can tell the ones that have just copied and pasted, don't you? Or they get your name right, but the name of the podcast show is incorrect because they've forgotten to change that.
But you've got a good example of that, Joyce, haven't you? That there's a particular type of publisher. There's a particular publisher that's got. He spells his name. His name's Lobby, but he spells it wrong. Have you?
Yeah.
Can you tell
L-A-B-E is how he spells his name. He's an agent. He's a literary agent. And people will email him, their book proposals and have spelled L-O-B-B-Y, and he'll just toss it. And cause it's like, if you can't spell my name right, what else are you not going to pay attention to?
No, if you
go to his website, it's all over his website because it's the Lobby Agency. Is a Steve Lobby Agency is his agency name. So you obviously weren't paying attention.
Without fail, the worst guests I've ever had on, like the least successful experiences for me and for them, were people who came through like customer service. We're like, I want to be on the podcast. And so the customer service people give them to me. I'm like, oh, did you not see it? Any of the 11 million places where it says that I host the podcast and all the ways to reach me? If they care so little that they're going to like some generic customer service thing, it's never, ever worked out well.
Yeah. It's a very, very good question. And I really want to pick up on that because some people who want to podcast might not yet be brave enough. And if you go right back to the front of the episode, you've got a riff, there's things that have to happen and things go wrong, and you've got to have the right mindset to deal with that. So we've had a really good chat there about what advice you give for others. We're getting to the top of the hour now. In fact, we've gone over the hour. I'm happy to keep going, but do you want to all wrap up and give us your details about how we can contact you and what you do and the various links that you have, and maybe Joyce can type those in for us?
Yeah. If you want to type them in the chat, our chat, and I can copy and paste them into this, whichever's easiest.
So I know Elaine, for instance, Elaine can go first. Her business name is Truel Social. I've never really understood why that is. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of that name?
Yes. Truel came along long before trolls came along on the internet. Truel is the name of our home. And in 1992, because I'm from Scotland, okay, most of my family, their homes have a name. They don't have a street address. It's the Croft, or the Shepherd's Croft or whatever. So we ended up a little tongue-in-cheek, but the name is an acronym, and that's why I write it all caps. It means the rest of our lives. So in the 90s, when I decided to put together a production company, it became Truel Productions. The name on the house was Truel. And so it just kind of went from there. So once we got into social media, we became Truel Social Media to be online. Not realizing back in 2010 that, oh my God, everybody and their uncle, oh, your name's Troll?
Wow.
Yeah.
And can you tell me also about your TV show? Because you've got a very, 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 very cool TV show.
Thank you. BBP TV, it actually stands for Business Banter Plus TV. I live in a federal town in Canada's capital. Everything is a bloody acronym, so what the hell? Why fight them, right? It's Business Banter to me was, I started it actually on a lark, and very, very quickly realized that this was really important because it let people see people in all walks of life, people that were super, super successful, people that were on the way up, people that had tried and failed and fall down, and all kinds of tips and tweaks and what have you to help other people in their digital journey. Because in my background, when I'm not on the show, I do integration and optimization. We've developed a method online. So that's kind of where we're all about. But I've had everything from producers, in Hollywood, we got to screen the first showing of American Drug War II with Kevin, and Sekou Andrews, who is a spoken word poet who created the awesome anthem, who's just amazing. And lots of not just marketers, but tons of authors and comedians and all kinds of people from every walk of life, just kind of putting one leg in their pants at a time, just like everybody else, and wrap it up here. Keith, the whole thing is, I'm the second most curious person on the planet. Okay, we know the first one's in Texas, the biggest, best, and he's always in Texas, so I didn't want to fight that. I just say I'm the second.
Wow.
And I love it. I love getting to hear what people do. And
do you do that as a live stream, or do you do that on Zoom and pre-record and send it to YouTube?
Mostly live stream. Because see, we started in Hangouts, so it was always live stream.
That's right. You've been ahead of the game forever, haven't you? I think you started it.
Not as ahead of the game as Kerry when it comes to
2005.
But doing it live has really made it a richer experience because the community brings their comments to it. They ask questions that we didn't think of. People bring, their fans come over and they know a lot more about them. Even if you've researched, fans will know a lot more about the person than you do. Yeah. They can ask a great question. It's really a whole different experience. They even talk to each other, like you're seeing now. Like people will be like, "Oh, hey, Joyce, didn't see you for a while. Hey, Elaine." Like it's so cool. Anyway,
I specifically love that component, and just to reiterate, we're sending it to a Facebook page, a Facebook group, and Periscope. So we're getting like 3 feeds in, and you can see that the types of comments slightly differ as as the different sites come in. But Kerry, how many shows do you do? And you want to just give us the skinny on how we can find about those?
Sure. So the Backpack Show with Chris Brogan is live every day at 10 a.m. Eastern. That's a video show. And we have 2 guests per day. So tomorrow we have a country music star, Jimmy Charles, and Becky McRae, who's a rural and small town business expert. So we have them coming on. But you can always find the newest episode at cbrogan.me/BP Live. I should have put that one in the chat. I will. But that's every day.
BP Live, okay. Yeah.
Right. And then Punch Out is the podcast I do where we talk about what people do outside of work. We don't talk about any work. It's all hobbies and volunteer work and stuff like that. And that's at punchoutwithus.com.
Can you pick up on that? This is a really interesting concept. You're actually talking about almost like I think you called it the anti-hustle. It's like, okay, you're a really powerful person in the business world, but what's your personal life like? What are you doing? Tell me a little bit about this show. This is brilliant.
Well, I'll try and do it really quickly because I know we're at the end, but basically it's a lot of people have the idea that you have to hustle all the time or you will not be successful. But meanwhile, a lot of the people and thought leaders and authors and speakers that we all admire in the marketing and business space, they don't live like that. They're not hustle all the time. They make time in their lives for volunteer work. They take time for, to explore hobbies, have collections, side hustles even that feed their creative reservoir, fill it back up again. That's key to their success. So like your off hours are as important to your holistic success as your on hours. So that's what it's all about. That's all we talk about with people. And it's so interesting to hear about their volunteer work. When Samantha Stone tries a new hobby every year, like she just tries a new one, well, ideally something she's not good at and she doesn't kind of want to do, but she's scared of, and she'll just try it. So it makes all the difference.
For the challenge.
It's so much better for your mental health, your spiritual health, everything, than focusing on all work all the time. You do better work when you look to your health overall.
That is brilliant. What about you, Annmarie? You've got a few irons in the fire as well, haven't you?
Yeah, my latest podcast is Industry Thought Leader podcast, and I've also shared another link for those people who are thinking of creating a podcast and they really want to incorporate that to build their brand and obviously their business. I created a quiz with the 5 pillars that I often recommend that people really need to consider. And there's also some videos there and other resources to get them started. But that's the quiz link that they can get access to as well. But I've got another 2 podcasts, one that is currently in production, the Christian Entrepreneurs podcast. And I think, Joyce, you're going to be coming on that.
Yes.
On the track. And then another one which I mentioned, I put a hold on that as we put some projects together, but I'll be relaunching that soon again as well, called Women in Leadership Podcast. It's always a lot of fun too.
Because I think I use the phrase the cup runneth over. We have lots of creative energy, and as we do more, we want to give more. And as we learn, it seems a shame to bottle it up and keep it to ourselves. We want to absolutely share it out. And I love the idea of having a new hobby every year just to slightly challenge yourself. In lockdown, I've just absolutely blitzed this live streaming thing. I'm not saying I'm any good at it, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. And you can see that just about every 2 seconds, I'm trying something different. It's my ADHD and my ENFP-ness coming out. But actually, I won't say that again. That's pretty scary. But I want to throw to Joyce, because I want to tell the world what we're doing, and I'm very proud of this. This particular show is absolutely a free offering to our Facebook group and the world. It's a free group. It's a free thing every week, but we've got more. Can you tell us a little bit about how we're planning this all out?
How we're planning it out. What are we planning?
Well, we've got a funnel. Just to pick up on what Lydia was saying, we have a bit of a funnel. This particular show is free. And we have what's called the Writing Club. Can you tell us about the Writing Club, for instance?
Yes. So the next step up would be the Writing Club, because we do a lot more of this kind of thing in the Writing Club. And we teach you the writing process, as well as having Marketing Mondays with Keith once a month. And then we do a group coaching call once a month. And we've just added a fiction coach, because I'm a nonfiction coach, writing coach. And we just added a fiction coach, because I had about 3 people in there, and another lady just joined recently. So there are now 4 people that are writing fiction. And what I teach helps them some, but if you've ever written fiction, it's a whole different beast. But what's great about this group is not only do you get the support from us live, you get support in the Facebook group and in the trainings that we offer every month. And the great thing is they're in there. You can go see them whenever you want. And if you can't make it live, they're recorded so that you can check it out and you can always ask questions. And what I love to do is I love to help people on their writing journey. And sometimes the writing club is the best place to start because they're just getting going. And they're not really sure. I talked to a lady today. She wants to write a fiction novel. Well, sort of. She'd really rather there's somebody else write it because she's really busy with her business, but nobody else will. And the idea just keeps nagging at her. So she's like, I guess I'm going to have to be the one.
Can I just pick up on what you've just said there? Because Elaine and I, before the call, have had this conversation. You know, Elaine is this awesome person who's busy all the time. She really doesn't have time to sit down and write her book. She's got a book in her, but she doesn't have time. Can you explain how that would work for someone who hasn't got time to write a book and you help them write it? How does that work?
Well, there's a couple different ways, but the biggest thing is just start small. We've got Grace, who's in our group. She wrote 30,000 words, just writing 15 minutes a day before she got out of bed.
Sorry, that is not going to happen.
Okay. Well, that's one way. That's one way to do it. That's not.
Let's be honest here.
So there is a grace. It wasn't totally random.
See, there is a grace.
There is a grace. I'm just not her.
Oh, we should do this every week.
You could probably transcribe so many episodes that you've done, Elaine, and let that be.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Transcribing things that you already have, and then more. You know, you got to recreate them or rework them into a book format, because you can't just, like I've told people, and I'm sure y'all have seen this, take your blog post and make a book. And I'm always, it just makes me cringe. Please don't. You can't just make blog posts and
slap a cover on it and off you go.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, then that's a book of your blog post. That's not a book. But
compilation.
But there are other ways to do it. You can have somebody interview you, Elaine, as well, and get that. And that's something that I do with people. Is if they want to do it that way, is I will interview you and get the information from you, and then create it, and then give it to you to look at, and you go, yes, no, I don't like this, or I add this, add that. And essentially that's a form of ghostwriting. And that's a form of ghostwriting. That's another way. So there are different ways to do it. If you are more of a audio person that you like to speak things out, then I always recommend, most of us have a phone, a cell phone, record it yourself, talking out your ideas, if that's what's best for you. And then have them transcribed on Descript or wherever, there's a bunch of places that will transcribe audio, and learn how to do the writing if you want to actually do the writing yourself. But that's an easier way for people that like to do audio, like Keith and Elaine, is talk it out, transcribe it, and then make it pretty. But you need a plan to the process, because if you're just talking for talking's sake, it's kind of like back to the blog thing. So
Can I ask Elaine, is it something that's on the radar and you don't have time, or is it's probably about the only thing you haven't done? Like, you've done just about everything else. Is it one of those things that's on the bucket list and you just can't get to it?
Well, there's actually some of it, the bare bones, I don't know, 12 or 15,000 words are kind of out there. But as you know, I have two very different paths, and it just, there's no time to kind of put all the pieces together. The audio thing sounds like a really great idea. Sending stuff in to transcribe, do they penalize you for swearing?
I think they just transcribe it. They don't care. You said the F word. $50.
Now, hold on. You will love this. I'm ghostwriting a book right now for a lady. It's a Christian book, okay? And I'm looking through the transcription because she did some audios and where she's teaching. and it comes back and it says something about weed and tequila. And I'm like, what? And so,
I want to have a religious experience.
All right.
I told her because I took a screenshot of the transcription and sent it to her. And I said, well, and she goes, well, I do like that. And she said, just kidding. And I said, well, you got a new book, Weed, Jesus, and Tequila,
Well, you can keep the weed, but I'll
AI.
take the tequila.
But let me pick up on this. This is a very key point because I'm into audio and video.
Yeah.
Annemarie, you've written several books. Have you noticed that particular part of your business model really changed the dimension? Did it add another dynamic?
I wrote the first book was it was only 2 books. I've given, compilation chapters and things like that, but 2 books just on my own. But the reason that I wrote was because, number one, the first book was Ace That Interview, and a lot of clients wanted to hire me to interview coach. I could not. I only had so many hours in the day. So I packaged a lot of what I would, coach them on in the book. And then my second book, Industry Thought Leader, How to Go From Invisible to Influential and Profitable with a Podcast, was getting my system out of my head and into a book form, which then became a course. So it's really the signature system, the steps. So I did it more as a way for me to create content that made sense, because I created the framework first, and then I realized, hang on, I've got to move this here and there, and that became a book. So there was purpose in my publishing, but it wasn't so much that, hey, I want to write a book. I did it because I knew that it would add value to my clients and it'll enable me to get everything out of here and onto documentation.
What about you, Kerry? Have you got a book in you, or have you got a book out? Is that one of the things you've got on your bucket list? No?
It's not on my bucket list. I mean, someday I'll probably do it. There has been many days that I was the only I was the only one on the Backpack Show that doesn't have a book. That's happened. I don't know. I feel like I'd want something to say first. You know?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't have a book, and I'm okay with that. But
you reordered us. Is this like an order of coolness?
Yeah, it's like a badge of honor. The only 2 things I haven't done is a TED Talk and a book. So, they're the sorts of things that they go on a list, don't they? TED Talk, you've got a book, you've got a podcast, you've got a live stream, you've got a YouTube channel, you're speaking in the city, you've got a beautiful wife. That would only apply to me. Well,
not
maybe
necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, it wouldn't. And especially it wouldn't. But
I'm holding myself to the same standard when people want to come on the Backpack Show and I'm like, do something interesting and tell me about it. Like, I want to do something interesting before I write a book. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing 2 or 3 podcasts. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why this show exists, the reason why this idea exists is because the people in this group, the Facebook group and the Facebook page, they want to write a book. But what we know for sure is that lots and lots of people that write a book wait until the book comes out and it's in a box and they're begging people to buy them. And we want to get ahead of the game and say, look, just spend an hour a day or an hour a month thinking about other ways you can build a tribe, an email newsletter, a live stream, a podcast in this instance talking about today's show, but also a blog. So I wanted to thank you all so much for coming on this show, which I'm very proud of. It's an offering to the world. So thanks once again. One last whip around the room to just give us a last piece of wisdom about podcasting and why you do it and what people could learn from doing it.
I'm all out. I'm all out of wisdom.
You're all out of wisdom? Okay.
What we mentioned, and I love what Kerry once said about when she was asked about people coming on her podcast. So often what people ask is, well, how large is your audience and that kind of thing. And I find that often too when people start a podcast, what they want to do is get on the new and noteworthy of Apple and have millions of downloads and all of that kind of stuff. And they get caught in the vanity metrics. And I've had colleagues that have had podcasts that have had millions of downloads, but they've had to stop the podcast because it really wasn't aligned with their business vision and they weren't able to monetize it, other than obviously sponsorships. But sponsorships can only get you so far. If you're monetizing your message, focus on that first if you're a service-based business. So I say focus on building reputation equity first and not worry about the vanity metrics, because when we do, we lead with value. And that's what Kerry has said. That's what Elaine said as well. You know, become that category of one. Know who you are. Become that category of one. Speak to an audience of one, and continue to deliver just outstanding excellence in the material. And your audience will grow, and it will grow exponentially.
Okay. And Elaine, what do you think? One last piece of wisdom for podcasting and video making?
Well, besides, be you. Okay, don't bring your radio voice, or don't try to make everything roses and peachy. The more authentic you can be, the better off it will be for your listener. Because guess what? It's all about them. It's not about you.
Yeah. And what about you, Joyce? So you've got a podcast, and you've had one since before we've known each other. Have you found a particular type of benefit from having a podcast as well? I'd love to hear your point of view.
I love meeting everybody that I meet in an interview, because they do, like we were talking about earlier, they bring that other dimension that sometimes either it's not on my radar or it's not my expertise. And so I get to share with my listeners some more information. Plus, I always ask, because most of the people I interview are authors, I ask, what is your writing routine like? And of course, everybody's is different. And it's always good to hear what other people are doing, because then for the listeners, I hope it's, like, hey, let me try that. That might work for me. And so I have always loved that. But what the other part I love is, I'm in a ton of different Facebook groups for different things, 20K Nation and B School and all these other things that I do. And I love being able to have, somebody says, I want to write a book. Hey, well, I have a podcast. How do you start a book? You want to check it out? Here it is. And it's a very soft and easy way to say, I want to help you, and here's a way I can help you, without going, well, you should schedule a call with me and I can show you how to do that.
Very exciting.
Right. I'm offering them some value. And then if they want to connect with me from there, then we can connect. And so that's the thing that I love. And it's, I think people ask me, or even in the group, you get the same questions a lot. And I can, like the Susan O'Neill's podcast about the sharing the list. Marketing is what it is. Marketing her book. That I share that one a lot. So there's like a good 4 or 5 of them. I know the numbers off the top of my head of what episode number it is, because I share it all the time, and it's easy to share that, and then it helps them. So I'm a helper. I love to help people, connect people, and if I can't help you, then I will help find the person who can help you. So that's the great thing about that. And that's what I love working with Keith. He brings all these beautiful people. So I wanted to tell you ladies, thank you for being here tonight, because you bring so much value to the group, and to, now that we're all over the place, we're on the page and my page and my profile page and the group. So, and Periscope, and we are literally all over the world right now.
Wow.
90 minutes of podcasty goodness.
Well, I'm going to let you go, because it's getting very late there in the eastern states, and I want to honour the fact that you've done me a huge favour by allowing your time, your schedule to come on my show. So thanks again, everyone, for coming on the show. We've had almost 100 comments in the Facebook group, and the Facebook group is a very lovely community, and please keep those comments going. We'll be doing those shows regularly, and we've got a good schedule of guests coming up. So I'll end the podcast there, and we'll share out some little highlights and snippets throughout the day on the various platforms. So thanks again, everyone.